The chickens came squawking off the supply wagon before anyone even saw the woman, and that was how Garrett Hayes first knew his well-ordered life on the Double H Ranch was about to change forever. He had been mending fence posts near the main road that hot August morning in 1882, his shirt already soaked through with sweat despite the early hour, when the commotion reached his ears. The chickens, 6 fat Rhode Island Reds, and a scrappy rooster with an attitude bigger than Texas itself, were making their displeasure known to everyone within a mile of the ranch entrance. Garrett straightened from his work, squinting against the Arizona sun as the wagon rolled closer, dust billowing behind it like a brown cloud. The driver was old Pete Morrison from town, but seated beside him was someone Garrett had never seen before. A woman, he realized, as the wagon drew near, with dark auburn hair pinned up beneath a practical wide-brimmed hat and a calico dress that had seen better days but was clean and neatly pressed. She sat straight-backed and proud, one hand gripping the wagon seat, the other clutching a worn leather satchel to her chest, as though it contained all her worldly treasures. Behind her, secured in hastily constructed crates, the chickens continued their raucous protests. Garrett pulled off his work gloves and walked toward the ranch yard, arriving just as Pete brought the wagon to a halt near the main house. The woman climbed down before either man could offer assistance, her movements graceful despite the obvious exhaustion in her face. She could not have been more than 23 or 24, Garrett guessed, and there was something in the set of her jaw that spoke of determination hard-won through difficult circumstances. "Miss Eleanor Hartley, here to see Mr. Hayes about the housekeeper position," Pete announced, though his tone suggested he had already tried to talk her out of this particular venture. "Came in on the morning stage from Tucson." Garrett's boss, Thomas Hayes, his uncle, who had given him a job and a purpose after the war had left him drifting, emerged from the ranch house at that moment. Thomas was a broad-shouldered man of 52 with silver threading through his dark hair and the weathered face of someone who had spent his entire life working the land. His expression shifted from curiosity to concern as he took in the scene before him. "Miss Hartley," Thomas said, his voice carrying the slight drawl of his Texas upbringing, "we spoke through correspondence. I had not expected you to arrive quite so soon, nor with such, companions." Eleanor Hartley lifted her chin. "Mr. Hayes, I appreciate the opportunity for employment, but I must be clear from the outset. Where I go, my chickens go. They are productive layers, well-behaved for the most part, and they require minimal care. I will tend them myself, of course, and any eggs beyond what I need for household cooking can be used as you see fit, but they are not negotiable." The rooster chose that moment to let out a particularly aggressive crow, as if emphasizing his mistress's point. Garrett found himself fighting back a smile. There was something admirable about a woman who would stake her livelihood on a flock of chickens, something that spoke to principles and loyalties he understood. Thomas Hayes looked at the chickens, then at the woman, then at his nephew. Garrett could see the calculation happening behind his uncle's eyes. They had been without a housekeeper for 3 months since Mrs. Patterson had retired to live with her daughter in California. The ranch house had descended into a state of bachelor chaos that was beginning to affect morale among the ranch hands. A woman who could cook and keep house was worth her weight in gold out here, even one who came with unusual requirements. "Miss Hartley," Thomas said slowly, "we do not currently have facilities for poultry on this ranch. We run cattle and horses, not chickens." "Then I will build a coop myself if I must," Eleanor replied, and Garrett could hear both desperation and steel beneath her words. "I have done it before. I require only some spare lumber and a few hours after my daily duties are complete." Garrett stepped forward before he could think better of it. "I could build it," he heard himself say, and both Thomas and Eleanor turned to look at him with surprise. "I mean, if Miss Hartley is hired, I could construct a proper chicken coop. Would not take more than a few days, and we have plenty of lumber from that stand of trees we cleared last month." Thomas raised an eyebrow at his nephew, a gesture that Garrett knew meant they would be having a conversation about this later, but he nodded. "Very well. Miss Hartley, the position pays $30 a month plus room and board. You will have the housekeeper's cottage behind the main house. Your duties will include cooking for myself and my nephew, as we take our meals separate from the ranch hands who have their own cook, as well as general housekeeping, laundry, and mending. We are not unreasonable employers, and we do not expect miracles, but we do expect honest work and discretion. There are 15 men employed on this ranch, and while I run a respectable operation, I will not have gossip or impropriety. Is that understood? Perfectly, Mr. Hayes, Eleanor said. I assure you I am here to work, nothing more. I have no interest in complications. Then welcome to the Double H Ranch, Thomas said, and he actually smiled. Garrett, help Miss Hartley get her chickens settled temporarily and then show her to the cottage. We can discuss the coop construction this evening. As Thomas returned to the house and Pete drove off with a wave, Garrett found himself alone with Eleanor Hartley and her feathered entourage. Up close, she was even more striking than he had first thought, with clear gray eyes that missed nothing, and a dusting of freckles across her nose that suggested she had spent plenty of time outdoors. There were shadows under those eyes, though, and a thinness to her frame that spoke of recent hardship. Thank you, she said quietly, and the fierce independence from moments ago softened into something more vulnerable. For offering to build the coop. You did not have to do that. Garrett shrugged, suddenly awkward under her direct gaze. Chickens need proper shelter, he said, and I'm a fair hand at carpentry. Used to help my father build barns back in Kansas before the war. You are Mr. Hayes's nephew? Eleanor asked as they carefully unloaded the chicken crates, the birds settling somewhat now that the wagon had stopped moving. Yes, ma'am, Garrett Hayes. Came out here about 5 years back after spending some time not quite sure what to do with myself. Uncle Thomas gave me a chance when I needed one, and I have been here ever since. I am the foreman now, which mostly means I get to do all the jobs nobody else wants while also telling people what to do. A smile flickered across Eleanor's face, the first he had seen, and it transformed her entirely. That sounds familiar. I was housekeeper and general manager for a hotel in Tucson until the owner died and his son decided he wanted to bring in his own people. I have been looking for work for 2 months. When I saw your uncle's advertisement, I wrote immediately. But I was honest about the chickens. I thought surely he would say no. Why are they so important to you? Garrett asked as they carried the crates toward an empty equipment shed where the chickens could stay until better arrangements were made. I mean no disrespect. I'm just curious. Eleanor was quiet for a moment, and Garrett thought perhaps he had overstepped, but then she spoke. They were my mother's. She passed a year ago from pneumonia. These chickens in that satchel are all I have left of her, of my family. My father died when I was 12. It has been just Mother and me for a long time, and when she got sick, I promised her I would take care of her girls. She named every one of them, talked to them like they were people. I know it seems foolish, but keeping that promise matters to me. Garrett thought of his own parents, both gone now. His father from a heart that gave out too soon, and his mother from grief not long after. He thought of the pocket watch he still carried that had belonged to his father, and how he would sooner starve than sell it. It is not foolish at all, he said. We hold on to what connects us to the people we loved. That is not foolish. That is being human. Eleanor looked at him then with an expression he could not quite read, something between gratitude and surprise, as though she had not expected understanding from a ranch foreman in Arizona. They settled the chickens in the shed with water and some cracked corn that Garrett scrounged from the horse feed, and then he showed her to the cottage. It was a small structure built solidly of adobe with a wooden roof and a covered porch. Inside were 2 rooms, a main living area with a small kitchen and a separate bedroom. The furniture was simple but well made, and someone, probably Thomas, had made an effort to clean before her arrival. There were fresh linens on the bed and wildflowers in a jar on the table. It is perfect, Eleanor said, and he could hear the emotion in her voice. I've been staying in a boarding house with 3 other women in 1 room. To have my own space again is a luxury I had not dared hope for. Get yourself settled, Garrett said. Uncle Thomas will not expect you to start until tomorrow. There is a pump around back for water, and the privy is behind those cottonwoods. If you need anything, the main house is just there, and my bunkhouse is the one with the blue door closer to the barns. Thank you, Mr. Hayes, Eleanor said. Garrett, he corrected. Everyone just calls me Garrett. Then thank you, Garrett, and I am Eleanor, though I suppose in front of others it should be Miss Hartley. He nodded and took his leave. But as he walked back toward the fence line he had abandoned, he found his thoughts kept drifting back to the woman with the gray eyes and the chickens. There had been something in her story, in her determination to keep a promise to her dying mother, that resonated with him in a way he had not expected. He had spent the last 5 years focused entirely on work, on rebuilding himself after the war had broken something inside him, on proving to his uncle and to himself that he was worth the second chance he had been given. He had not allowed himself to think about much beyond the next day's work, the next problem to solve, the next fence to mend. But now, unbidden, he found himself thinking about what it might be like to know someone like Eleanor Hartley better. He shook his head at his own foolishness. She had been here less than an hour, had made it clear she was here to work and nothing more, and he was already spinning daydreams like some green kid. He was 27 years old enough to know better. Still, that evening after supper, when he sat down with paper and pencil to sketch out plans for a chicken coop, he found himself designing something far more elaborate than 6 hens and a rooster strictly required. If Eleanor Hartley was going to keep her promise to her mother, then by God, those chickens were going to have the finest accommodations he could build. The next morning, Eleanor began her duties as housekeeper, and within 2 days it became clear to everyone on the Double H Ranch that they had stumbled into extraordinary luck. The woman could cook, truly cook, not just produce edible food, but create meals that had Thomas closing his eyes in satisfaction and Garrett finding excuses to linger over breakfast. She made light, fluffy biscuits and gravy that melted in the mouth, roasted chicken with herbs she had brought in her satchel, apple pie from dried fruit that somehow tasted like autumn itself. More than that, she brought order to the chaos of the ranch house. Clothes that had been mended with clumsy bachelor stitching were properly repaired, floors were swept and scrubbed until they gleamed, windows let in light they had not seen in months. She moved through her work with quiet efficiency, never complaining, never asking for help with tasks she could manage herself. And in the evenings, after her duties were done, she would sit on her cottage porch with mending or a book, and the chickens would scratch in the dirt around her, and Garrett would find himself watching from a distance, wondering what she was thinking. He began work on the coop 3 days after her arrival, selecting a spot not far from her cottage where the chickens would be safe from predators, but Eleanor could easily tend them. He had shown her his sketches the night before, half expecting her to laugh at the elaborate design. Instead, she had stared at the papers for a long moment before looking up at him. "This is too much," she had said softly. "It is bigger than your own bunkhouse." Garrett had shrugged, feeling his face heat under her gaze. Chickens need space to be happy and healthy, and if they are happy and healthy, they will lay better eggs. It is just practical. But they both knew it was more than that, and the knowledge hung between them like a question neither was quite ready to ask. He threw himself into the construction with a focus that did not go unnoticed by the other ranch hands. His best friend, Miguel Santos, who had worked on the Double H for nearly as long as Garrett and served as second in command, commented on it one morning as they worked together to frame out the walls. "You building a house for chickens or for a queen?" Miguel asked, his tone teasing but his dark eyes shrewd. "This is some pretty fancy work for birds who do not know the difference." "If I am going to build something, I am going to build it right," Garrett said, not meeting his friend's gaze as he measured another board. "Mm-hmm," Miguel said, and there was a world of knowing in that simple sound. "And it has nothing to do with the pretty housekeeper who watches you work every evening from her porch?" "She is watching the coop, not me," Garrett protested. "If you say so, amigo. But I have eyes, and I see how you look at her too, like a man who has found something he did not know he was looking for." Garrett set down his hammer. "It is not like that. She has been here less than a week." "And yet here you are, building a palace for her chickens," Miguel pointed out. "I am not saying it is a bad thing, Garrett. You have been alone since I've known you. Maybe it is time you let yourself want something more than just the next day's work." Before Garrett could respond, Eleanor herself appeared, carrying a basket covered with a cloth. She had her hair tied back with a ribbon, and the afternoon sun caught the red highlights in it, making it glow like copper. "I thought you might like some lemonade and sandwiches," she said, her voice a little breathless, as though she had hurried. "It is terribly hot, and you have been working for hours." Miguel accepted a glass with a charming smile and a thank you before making a transparent excuse about needing to check on something in the barn, leaving Garrett alone with Eleanor and the unfinished Coop. "He is not subtle," Eleanor observed, a smile tugging at her lips as she handed Garrett his lemonade. "He thinks he's being helpful," Garrett said, drinking deeply. The lemonade was tart and sweet, and exactly what he needed. "Thank you for this. You did not have to go to the trouble." "It is no trouble. Besides, I wanted to see the progress." Eleanor walked around the emerging structure, running her hand along the smooth wood. "You are putting in nesting boxes and a proper roosting area. And is this going to be a window?" "Chickens need light and air circulation," Garrett explained, following her. "And I thought I would screen it so they get ventilation, but predators cannot get in. The door will have a good latch, and I'm going to dig the walls into the ground a bit and line them with stones so nothing can burrow under." Eleanor shook her head in wonder. "Garrett, this is beautiful work. These chickens will live better than most people." "Your mother's chickens deserve a good home," he said. "You made her a promise, and I want to help you keep it." Something shifted in Eleanor's expression, a softening around her eyes, a vulnerability in the set of her mouth. "Why?" she asked quietly. "Why does it matter to you?" Garrett set down his glass and considered his words carefully. "When I came back from the war, I was not in a good place. I had seen things, done things that I could not quite figure out how to live with. I drifted for a couple of years, working odd jobs, drinking too much, getting into fights. I was angry at the world and at myself. My Uncle Thomas found me in a jail cell in New Mexico, drunk and disorderly, and instead of leaving me there like I probably deserved, he paid my fine and brought me here. He gave me a job and a purpose when I did not think I deserved either." He paused, meeting her eyes. "He taught me that sometimes people need someone to believe in them, to give them a chance to keep the promises they make to themselves. You promised your mother you would take care of her chickens, that you would build a life for yourself. That matters. Promises like that are what keep us human, what connect us to the people we loved. So I guess I am trying to do for you what my uncle did for me, give you a chance to keep your promise." Eleanor was silent for a long moment, and when she spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. "That is the kindest thing anyone has said to me in a very long time. I thought when Mother died that I was completely alone in the world. It is strange to come to a place I have never been, to work for people I have never met, and find that maybe I am not as alone as I thought." Garrett wanted to tell her that she was not alone, that he saw her and understood something of what she was carrying, but the words felt too large and too soon. Instead, he said, "You have made a real difference here already. The house has never been so clean. And Uncle Thomas said yesterday that your pot roast was the best thing he had eaten since his wife died. You belong here, Eleanor. I hope you will stay." "I will stay as long as I am needed," she said, and the way she looked at him made his heart beat faster in his chest. Over the following weeks, as summer deepened into early autumn and the Arizona heat remained relentless, the chicken coop took shape. Garrett worked on it in the evenings after his ranch duties were complete, and gradually what had started as his project alone became something more communal. Miguel helped with the roof, his carpentry skills superior to Garrett's. Old Charlie, one of the veteran ranch hands, contributed a beautiful hand-carved sign that read Hartley House that they mounted above the door. Even Thomas came by one evening and helped paint the structure a cheerful red that matched the barn. Eleanor watched it all with an expression that cycled between gratitude, bewilderment, and something that looked almost like joy. She repaid the kindness in the ways she could, with extra care in her cooking, with mended shirts and darned socks, with lemonade and cookies delivered to whoever was working. The ranch hands, who had been uncertain about a woman in their midst at first, became fiercely protective of her. When young Billy Carter, barely 19 and new to the crew, made a slightly off-color comment in her presence, 3 of the older hands corrected him so sharply that the boy apologized profusely and was red-faced for days. Eleanor was their housekeeper, yes, but more than that, she was becoming part of the fabric of the ranch, someone they all valued and respected. Garrett noticed all of this, but what he noticed most was how he felt when Eleanor was near. His awareness of her had become a constant hum beneath everything else, a tuning fork that resonated whenever she entered a room. He noticed the graceful way she moved, the soft sound of her humming while she worked, the way she tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear when she was concentrating. He noticed that she always saved him the corner piece of cornbread because she had somehow figured out it was his favorite, and that she left wildflowers on the dinner table even though no one asked her to, and that she spoke to her chickens in the same gentle tone he had heard her use with a frightened horse one afternoon. He was falling in love with her, he realized one evening as he watched her gather eggs from the now completed coop, her chickens clucking contentedly around her feet. The realization should have terrified him. He had spent so long focused on just getting through each day that he had not imagined feeling this way about anyone. But instead of fear, what he felt was a strange sense of rightness, as though something that had been missing had finally clicked into place. The question was whether Eleanor felt anything similar. She was unfailingly kind to him, sought out his company in ways that seemed to go beyond mere friendliness, and sometimes he would catch her looking at him with an expression he could not quite read, but she had been so clear when she arrived that she was here to work, that she wanted no complications, and Garrett was terrified of misreading the situation and making her uncomfortable. Miguel, of course, had no such doubts. "She likes you, you fool," he said one evening when Garrett confessed his uncertainty. "Any blind man could see it. The way she smiles when you come into a room, the way she always makes sure you get the best portions at dinner, the way she invented a reason to ask your opinion on organizing the pantry last week. She likes you." "Or she is just being nice," Garrett argued. "She is a kind person. She is nice to everyone." "She is not nice to everyone the way she is nice to you," Miguel said. "But if you are too scared to find out, that is your choice. Just do not wait so long that you miss your chance. Women like Eleanor Hartley do not stay unattached forever." The thought of Eleanor with someone else sent a spike of jealousy through Garrett that confirmed everything Miguel was saying. He resolved to find a way to talk to her, to express something of what he was feeling, but every time he tried, the words tangled in his throat. The opportunity came on a late September evening when he found Eleanor at the chicken coop after supper, watching her birds settle in for the night. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, and there was finally a hint of coolness in the air that suggested the brutal summer heat was beginning to break. "They seem happy," Garrett said as he approached, and Eleanor smiled without looking away from the chickens. "They are. I think they have never had it so good, certainly better than when they were crammed in that tiny pen behind the boarding house." She turned to him then, her expression soft. "This coop is the most wonderful thing anyone has ever done for me, Garrett. I want you to know that." "It was nothing," he started to say, but she cut him off. "It was not nothing. It was everything. You took something I cared about seriously when most people would have laughed. You put time and effort and skill into building something beautiful for creatures that most people consider beneath notice. You helped me keep my promise to my mother." Her voice cracked slightly on the last words, and he saw the shine of tears in her eyes. Without thinking, Garrett reached out and took her hand. She did not pull away. "Eleanor, I need to tell you something, and I do not want to make things awkward or make you uncomfortable, but I cannot keep it to myself anymore." She looked up at him, her gray eyes wide. "What is it?" "I have come to care for you," he said, the words tumbling out now that he had started. "More than I should, probably more than I planned to. I think about you all the time. I look forward to meals because it means I will see you. I build chicken coops bigger than my own house because it makes you happy. I am falling in love with you, Eleanor, and I needed you to know even if you do not feel the same way." For a moment she was completely still, and Garrett's heart sank. He had misread everything. He had made a terrible mistake. But then Eleanor's face broke into a smile so radiant that it stole his breath. "Oh, thank God," she said, and she laughed, a sound of pure relief. "I have been trying to convince myself that what I felt was just gratitude, that it was too soon, that I was reading too much into every interaction. But Garrett, I have been falling in love with you too. I think I started falling the day you offered to build the coop, and I have not been able to stop." Garrett felt as though the world had suddenly become brighter, sharper, more full of possibility. "Really?" he asked, needing to hear it again. "Really," Eleanor confirmed, and she squeezed his hand. "I have never met anyone like you. You are kind without expecting anything in return. You are strong but gentle. You listen when I talk, really listen. You made me feel like I matter, like what I care about matters. How could I not fall in love with you?" He drew her closer, slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, but she came willingly, until they were standing so close he could see the exact pattern of the freckles on her nose, the flecks of blue in her gray eyes. "May I kiss you?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "I wish you would," she whispered. The kiss was soft and sweet and full of promise, a first kiss that felt like coming home after a long journey. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling like fools, and the chickens were making sleepy noises in their beautiful new coop, and the Arizona sky was full of stars just beginning to emerge in the deepening dusk. "What do we do now?" Eleanor asked, still holding both his hands in hers. "Now," Garrett said, "we figure it out together. If you will have me, if you think we can make this work, I would like to court you properly, with your permission and my uncle's blessing." "You have my permission," Eleanor said. "I cannot think of anything I would like more." They told Thomas the next morning before breakfast, both of them nervous, despite knowing that the older man was observant enough to have likely seen this coming. Thomas listened to Garrett's formal request to court Eleanor, heard Eleanor's assurance that this was what she wanted, and then he smiled, deep and genuine. "About time," he said. "I have been watching you two dance around each other for weeks. Garrett, you are like a son to me, and Eleanor, you have become like family to this ranch. If you can find happiness together, you have not just my blessing but my wholehearted support." The courtship that followed was sweet and proper, and everything that made sense for the time and place they were in. Garrett was conscious of Eleanor's reputation and of treating her with the respect she deserved. They took walks in the evening after her duties were finished, always in sight of the ranch buildings. They sat together on her cottage porch, talking for hours about their pasts, their dreams, their fears and hopes. Garrett told her about the war, about the things he had done and seen, about the guilt and anger he had carried for so long. Eleanor told him about her childhood, about watching her father die and feeling helpless, about caring for her mother through a long illness and then feeling lost when she was gone. They shared their dreams too. Garrett confessed that he had always wanted his own piece of land someday, a small ranch where he could raise horses. Eleanor admitted that she had always imagined a home full of laughter and children, a place where people felt safe and loved. As they talked, those separate dreams began to weave together into something shared, something they could both imagine reaching for together. Thomas watched the courtship with avuncular approval, occasionally inviting them both to dinner in the main house, treating Eleanor with a respect that made it clear she was not just the housekeeper anymore, but someone important to his nephew, and therefore to him. The ranch hands were similarly supportive, with Miguel being particularly insufferable in his smugness at having been right all along. As autumn deepened and the weather cooled, Garrett knew with increasing certainty that he wanted to marry Eleanor, to build a life with her. The question was whether it was too soon to ask. They had known each other only a few months, but what he felt was not some passing infatuation. It was deep and real and grounded in genuine knowledge of who she was as a person. He discussed it with Thomas one evening in late October as they sat on the ranch house porch watching the sun set over the mountains. "I want to ask Eleanor to marry me," Garrett said without preamble. but I worry it is too fast that she will think I am rushing her." Thomas was quiet for a moment, packing tobacco into his pipe with the methodical care he brought to most tasks. "How do you know you love her?" he finally asked. "I know because being with her makes me want to be a better man," Garrett said. "I know because when she is happy, I am happy. I know because when I think about the future, I cannot imagine it without her in it. I know because she sees me, really sees me, all the broken and difficult parts, and she chooses me anyway." Thomas lit his pipe, the sweet smoke drifting into the cooling air. "Then I think you have your answer. Time is not what matters, Garrett. What matters is knowing your own heart. You are not an impulsive man. If you are certain, then I think you should ask her. The worst she can say is that she needs more time. And if that is the answer, you respect it and wait." "I have nothing to offer her," Garrett said, voicing his deepest fear. "I am a ranch foreman with some savings, but no land of my own, no real prospects beyond what I have here." "You are offering her yourself," Thomas said. "Your love, your loyalty, your partnership. For the right woman, that is everything. And you might be surprised about the prospects part. I have been thinking about the future of this ranch, about what happens when I'm too old to run it. You have been my right hand for 5 years now, Garrett. You know this operation as well as I do. I have been considering making you a partner, giving you a stake in the place you have helped build. We can discuss the details, but I want you to know that your future here is secure. And if Eleanor becomes your wife, her future is secure too." Garrett felt emotion tighten his throat. "Uncle Thomas, I do not know what to say." "Say you will ask that girl to marry you and put both of you out of this lovesick misery," Thomas said, but his tone was affectionate. "And say you will accept my partnership offer because I am not getting any younger and I need to know this ranch will be in good hands." "Yes," Garrett said. "Yes to both." He bought the ring in town the following Saturday, a simple gold band with a small diamond that took most of his savings but felt right the moment he saw it. He carried it in his pocket for 3 days waiting for the right moment, until Eleanor finally asked him why he was acting so strangely. They were at the chicken coop. Where else? Watching the sunset and the chickens settling in for the night. It had become their place, where they always seemed to end up when they wanted to talk, where their relationship had begun. "Eleanor," Garrett said, his heart pounding so hard he was sure she could hear it. "I have something I need to ask you." She turned to him, her expression curious and a little concerned. "You have been acting odd for days. What is going on?" He took both her hands in his, looking into those gray eyes that had become home to him. "I know we have not been courting for very long. I know there are people who would say this is too fast, that we should wait. But Eleanor, I am certain about you, about us. I am more certain about this than I have been about anything in my entire life." He released one of her hands to fumble in his pocket for the ring, then dropped to one knee right there in the dirt by the chicken coop, the chickens clucking softly behind them. "Eleanor Hartley, you brought light into my life when I did not even know I was living in darkness. You brought purpose and joy and hope for a future I had stopped imagining. I love you with everything I am, and I want to spend the rest of my life making you happy, building a home with you, keeping the promises we make to each other. Will you marry me?" Eleanor's hands flew to her mouth, her eyes wide and shining with tears. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking. "Yes, Garrett, of course yes. I love you so much." He slipped the ring onto her finger with shaking hands, and then he stood and pulled her into his arms, kissing her with all the love and promise and certainty he felt. The chickens clucked their approval, and somewhere in the distance he heard cheering and realized that several of the ranch hands had been watching and word was already spreading. They were married 6 weeks later, in early December, in a simple ceremony in the small church in town. Eleanor wore a dress of cream-colored silk that Thomas had insisted on paying for, with wildflowers in her hair. Garrett wore his best suit, the one he had bought for funerals but had never imagined wearing for something this joyful. Miguel stood up as his best man, and Mrs. Rodriguez, who ran the general store in town and had befriended Eleanor, stood up for her. The ceremony was simple but deeply felt. When Garrett said his vows, promising to love and cherish Eleanor all the days of his life, his voice shook with the weight of what he was promising. When Eleanor said hers, promising the same, there were tears streaming down her face, but her voice was steady and sure. Thomas hosted a reception at the ranch, and it seemed like half the county turned out. There was food and music and dancing, and for one perfect day, Garrett allowed himself to be completely, unreservedly happy. They spent their wedding night in Eleanor's cottage, which would now be their home together. Thomas had already made it clear that Garrett's bunkhouse days were over, and that the cottage was theirs for as long as they wanted it, with plans to build them a larger house in the spring if they wanted. As they lay together that night, Eleanor curled against his side. Garrett ran his fingers through her hair and marveled at the turn his life had taken. "What are you thinking?" Eleanor asked softly. "I am thinking about chickens," he admitted, and she laughed. "Of course you are." "I am thinking about how you came here with those chickens, determined to keep a promise to your mother, and how I decided to build them a coop. I am thinking about how such a small thing, such a simple decision led to this, to us, to the happiest day of my life." Eleanor propped herself up on one elbow to look at him, her hair falling over her shoulder in a curtain of auburn silk. "It was not a small thing," she said. "It was everything. You saw what mattered to me, and you honored it. You built something beautiful because it would make me happy. That is not small, Garrett. That is love." "I do love you," he said, pulling her back down into his arms. "I will love you until the day I die and beyond if I can manage it." "And I love you," she whispered against his chest. "My cowboy who builds chicken palaces." They settled into married life with surprising ease. Eleanor continued her work as housekeeper, though now it felt different, like she was caring for her own home rather than working for someone else. Thomas made good on his promise to make Garrett a partner in the ranch, drawing up papers that gave him a 25% stake in the operation, with an option to buy more as the years went on. The partnership changed things in subtle but important ways. Garrett was no longer just a foreman following orders, but a co-owner with a say in major decisions. He took to the responsibility naturally, and Thomas frequently commented that having Garrett as a partner made him feel like he could finally breathe easy about the ranch's future. Winter in Arizona was mild compared to what Garrett remembered from Kansas, but it still brought cooler temperatures and occasional rain that turned the dusty ranch yard to mud. The chickens thrived in their elaborate coop, laying eggs faithfully, and Eleanor often joked that they were the best house chickens in the entire territory. As the new year of 1883 began, Eleanor started to notice changes in herself. She was tired more often, queasy in the mornings, and certain smells that had never bothered her before suddenly made her feel ill. She knew what it meant, but was afraid to hope, afraid to say it out loud until she was certain. When she finally told Garrett one evening in late January, she was nervous, despite knowing he would be happy. "I think I'm pregnant," she said as they sat together on the small sofa in their cottage, her hand finding his. "I am not completely certain yet, but all the signs are there." Garrett went very still, and for a moment Eleanor worried that perhaps she had been wrong about his reaction, but then he turned to her, and the expression on his face was one of such pure, unfiltered joy that she felt tears spring to her eyes. "A baby?" he said, his voice wondering. "We are going to have a baby?" "I think so. Probably late summer if my calculations are right." Garrett let out a whoop of joy and pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she had to remind him to be gentle. "I am going to be a father," he said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Eleanor, we are going to be parents." "Are you happy?" she asked, even though she could see that he was. "Happy does not even begin to cover it," he said. "Terrified, overwhelmed, excited, grateful, all of it at once, but mostly happy. So incredibly happy." Thomas was equally delighted when they told him the news, and he immediately began making plans to convert one of the rooms in the cottage into a nursery. The ranch hands were thrilled, with Miguel already placing bets on whether it would be a boy or girl, and Charlie starting to carve a cradle from a piece of oak he had been saving for something special. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the spring and into the summer. Eleanor continued her work as long as she was able, though Garrett fussed over her constantly, worrying about her lifting anything heavy or working too hard. She tolerated his concern with good humor, understanding that it came from love. As her belly grew, she often found herself sitting by the chicken coop in the evenings, one hand resting on the swell of her pregnancy, watching the birds and thinking about her mother. She wished desperately that her mother could be here to see this, to know that Eleanor had found happiness and love, that the grandchild she had hoped for would soon arrive. "I kept my promise, Mama," she whispered to the evening air one night. "I took care of your chickens, and they led me to him. They led me to Garrett and to this life. I wish you could see how happy I am." Garrett found her like that, tears on her cheeks, and sat down beside her without a word. He simply held her hand and sat with her in her grief and her joy, understanding that she could feel both at once. The baby came on a hot August night, almost exactly a year after Eleanor had first arrived at the Double H Ranch. The labor was long and difficult, and Garrett paced outside the cottage while Mrs. Rodriguez, who had experience as a midwife, attended Eleanor inside. Miguel and Thomas kept him company, preventing him from wearing a trench in the ground or breaking down the door every time Eleanor cried out. Finally, as dawn was breaking over the mountains, the thin wail of a baby filled the air. Mrs. Rodriguez emerged a few minutes later, tired but smiling. "You have a son," she said. "A big, healthy boy with a good set of lungs, and your wife is tired but well. You can go in now." Garrett practically ran inside to find Eleanor propped up in bed, exhausted and sweaty and more beautiful than he had ever seen her, holding a small bundle wrapped in a soft blanket. She looked up when he entered, and her smile was radiant. "Come meet your son," she said. Garrett approached slowly, almost reverently, and looked down at the tiny face peeking out from the blanket. The baby had wisps of dark hair, and Eleanor's nose, and the tiniest, most perfect fingers Garrett had ever seen. "He is perfect," Garrett whispered, afraid to speak too loudly. "Eleanor, you are amazing. He is amazing. I cannot believe he is ours." "Do you want to hold him?" Eleanor asked, and at Garrett's nervous nod, she carefully transferred the baby into his arms. The weight was nothing and everything all at once. Garrett stared down at his son. This tiny person who was half him and half the woman he loved, and felt something fundamental shift in his soul. He had thought he understood love, but this was something beyond anything he had imagined. "Hello, little one," he murmured. "I am your papa. I promise I am going to do everything I can to be a good father to you, to keep you safe and loved and happy." "We should give him a name," Eleanor said softly. They had discussed names for months, debating and considering. Now, looking at his son, Garrett knew what felt right. "What about James?" he suggested. "James Thomas Hayes. James for your father, Thomas for my uncle who gave us this chance." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "James Thomas Hayes," she repeated. "That is perfect. Hello, James. Welcome to the world, my sweet boy." Thomas was predictably overjoyed to have the baby named after him, and he took his role as honorary grandfather with great seriousness. He carved toys, told stories, and was frequently found holding baby James with a besotted expression that none of the ranch hands had ever seen on the normally gruff rancher. The chickens, still faithfully producing eggs, seemed to understand that the household dynamics had shifted. They would cluck softly when Eleanor brought the baby out to sit in the shade, as though offering their own welcome to the newest member of the family. As James grew from a tiny infant to a chubby, smiling baby and then into a toddler learning to walk, Garrett often found himself marveling at the life he had built. He would watch Eleanor playing with their son, singing to him while she worked, teaching him the names of the chickens, and feel overwhelmed with gratitude for the day she had arrived with her determination and her chickens and her refusal to compromise on what mattered to her. When James was 2 years old, Eleanor became pregnant again. This time Garrett was less panicked and more just excited, though he still fussed over her constantly. Their daughter, whom they named Sarah Grace after Eleanor's mother, arrived on a cool March evening in 1886, much faster than her brother had. She was smaller and fiercer than James had been, with auburn hair like her mother, and a will that made itself known from the very beginning. With 2 young children, the cottage began to feel cramped, and Thomas made good on his long-standing offer to build them a proper house. They chose a spot on a gentle rise with a view of the mountains, and over the summer of 1886, a beautiful house took shape. It had 4 bedrooms, a large kitchen, a spacious living area, and at Eleanor's insistence, a screened porch that wrapped around 2 sides. "For watching the sunset, shmomakus na kamai," she said when Garrett asked about the porch, "and for sitting together after the children are in bed, and for being able to see the chicken coop because some things should always be kept in sight." The chicken coop, expanded now to accommodate a growing flock, remained where it had always been, a monument to promises kept and love found in unexpected places. They moved into the new house in September, and Eleanor stood in the living room on that first day, holding Sarah while James ran from room to room exploring and cried tears of joy. "What is wrong?" Garrett asked, immediately concerned. "Nothing is wrong," Eleanor said, laughing through her tears. "Everything is right. More right than I ever dreamed it could be. 4 years ago, I was alone and grieving and had nothing but a satchel and some chickens. Now I have this house, these children, you. I have a home, Garrett, a real home." He pulled her close, careful of the baby between them, and kissed her temple. "You gave me a home too," he said. "I had a place to live and work to do, but I did not have a home until you. You brought life and love and purpose. You made me believe in futures worth building." That evening, after the children were asleep and the house was quiet, they sat together on the new porch, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. The chickens were settling in their coop, making soft nighttime sounds. The ranch was peaceful, prosperous, and theirs in all the ways that mattered. "Do you ever think about how it all started?" Eleanor asked, her head on Garrett's shoulder. "All the time," he admitted. "I think about you climbing off that wagon with your chin up and your chickens in tow, refusing to compromise on what mattered. I think about how I offered to build a coop without even thinking about it, just knowing it was the right thing to do. I think about how all of it, every single piece, led us here." "The chickens are still going strong," Eleanor observed. "The original ones, at least. I think they know they are special." "They led me to you," Garrett said. "That makes them the most special chickens in the world." The years continued to unfold with the steady rhythm of ranch life. James grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who followed his father everywhere, learning the ranch work with quiet determination. Sarah was his opposite in many ways, bold and adventurous, more likely to be found climbing trees or investigating the barn than sitting still for lessons. But she was also fiercely loving, and she adored her older brother with a loyalty that was fierce and unwavering. In 1889, when James was 6 and Sarah was 3, Eleanor discovered she was pregnant again. This pregnancy was harder than the previous 2, and she was often sick and exhausted. Garrett worried constantly, but Eleanor insisted she was fine, just tired. Their 3rd child, a daughter they named Mary Eleanor, arrived in the spring of 1890. She was tiny and perfect, with dark hair like her father, and a disposition so peaceful that Eleanor joked she was making up for how difficult the pregnancy had been. With 3 children, life was chaotic and exhausting and more wonderful than either Garrett or Eleanor had imagined. The house was always full of noise and laughter and the controlled chaos of childhood. The chickens, now including several generations of descendants from Eleanor's original flock, were a constant presence, and the children learned early to gather eggs and care for the birds. Thomas, now in his 60s, gradually stepped back from the day-to-day operations of the ranch, leaving more and more in Garrett's capable hands. He spent his time doting on the children, teaching them to ride, telling them stories of the old days, and making it clear that they were his legacy as surely as the land itself. In 1893, Thomas suffered a heart attack while working in the barn. Garrett found him and got him to the house, but it was clear that this was serious. The doctor came and did what he could, but Thomas was weakening. For 3 days, Thomas lingered, and Garrett barely left his side. On the evening of the third day, with Garrett and Eleanor both there, Thomas opened his eyes and seemed clearer than he had been. "Garrett," he said, his voice weak but steady, "you have been the son I never had. This ranch, everything I built, it is yours now. Take care of it. Take care of your family. You have made me so proud." "Uncle Thomas, do not talk like this," Garrett said, though he could feel the tears on his face. "You are going to be fine." "We both know that is not true," Thomas said, "but it is all right. I am ready. I have lived a good life, and these last years, watching you and Eleanor build your family, watching those children grow, have been the best of all. I am going out happy, Garrett. Not everyone can say that." "I love you," Garrett said. "Thank you for everything, for saving me, for believing in me, for giving me this life." "You saved yourself," Thomas said. "I just gave you a place to do it. Now promise me you will take care of Eleanor and those babies. Promise me you will keep this ranch going, make it something your children can be proud of." "I promise," Garrett said. Thomas smiled, squeezed Garrett's hand weakly, and closed his eyes. An hour later he was gone, slipping away peacefully with the people he loved nearby. The grief was profound. Thomas had been mentor, uncle, father figure, and friend all rolled into one. He had given Garrett a second chance at life and had welcomed Eleanor into his family without hesitation. The ranch felt empty without him. They buried him on the ranch, on a hillside with a view of the mountains he had loved. The entire community turned out for the funeral, testament to the respect Thomas had earned over his years in the territory. Eleanor stood beside Garrett, holding Mary, while James and Sarah pressed close to their father's legs, not fully understanding death, but knowing something important had changed. In the weeks that followed, Garrett discovered that Thomas had left everything to him. The entire ranch, the land, the cattle, the horses, all of it was now his. There were provisions for Eleanor and the children as well, trust funds set up to ensure their security no matter what happened. Thomas, always practical, had made sure his family would be taken care of. The responsibility was enormous, but Garrett did not shy away from it. He had been running the ranch for years already. Now he did so as the owner rather than partner, and he did it with Miguel at his side, promoting his friend to full partner just as Thomas had once done for him. Eleanor was his rock through it all, managing the household, raising their children, and being the steady, loving presence that kept him grounded when the weight of responsibility threatened to overwhelm him. She had become the heart of the ranch in ways that went beyond her role as Garrett's wife. The ranch hands came to her with problems, with celebrations, with milestones. She was the one who remembered birthdays, who made sure everyone had warm clothes for winter, who organized the Christmas celebration that brought everyone together. As the 1890s progressed, the ranch prospered. Garrett proved to be as good an owner as he had been a foreman, with a knack for breeding quality horses that brought buyers from across the territory. Miguel handled the cattle operation, and together they built something even stronger than what Thomas had created. The children grew. James, serious and steady, proved to have his father's gift with horses. Sarah, wild and free-spirited, loved the cattle best and could outride most of the ranch hands by the time she was 12. Mary, gentle and observant, loved the chickens as much as her mother did and took over much of their care, expanding the flock and improving the breeds. In 1897, when Eleanor was 38 and Garrett was 42, they were surprised and delighted to discover that Eleanor was pregnant again. They had assumed their family was complete, but this unexpected blessing was welcomed with joy. Their fourth child, a son they named Thomas after the uncle who had meant so much to them both, arrived healthy and strong in the spring of 1898. Little Thomas, as he was called to distinguish him from the uncle he had never met, was a happy, easy baby who grew into a charming, mischievous boy. He was the favorite of his older siblings, who all doted on him shamelessly. As the new century approached, Garrett and Eleanor would sometimes sit on their porch in the evenings, watching their children play in the yard, and reflect on the life they had built. "Do you remember," Eleanor said one evening, "when you told me that you were falling in love with me by the chicken coop?" "I remember everything about that night," Garrett said. "I was terrified you would reject me." "I was terrified you would never say anything," Eleanor countered. "I had been waiting for weeks for you to give some indication that what I felt was not entirely one-sided." "We were both fools dancing around each other like that." "Maybe," Eleanor agreed, "but we found our way to each other in the end. That is what matters." Garrett pulled her closer, and she rested her head on his shoulder, a gesture so familiar and comfortable that it felt like breathing. "I built you a chicken coop," he said, amused. "You built me a palace for chickens," she corrected, "and in doing so, you built me a life I never dreamed I could have. You kept my promise to my mother alive, and you gave me a family and a home and a love I cherish every single day." "The chickens did most of the work," Garrett joked. "I just provided the lumber." Eleanor laughed and swatted his arm gently. "Give yourself more credit, Garrett Hayes. You provided love and kindness and a willingness to see what mattered to a lonely woman with nowhere to go. You provided a future." "We provided each other a future," Garrett said. "That is the truth of it. I was drifting before you came, just going through the motions. You gave me a reason to build something, to plan for tomorrow instead of just surviving today." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. The chickens, still in their elaborate coop that had been repaired and expanded over the years, were settling in for the night. In the yard, James was teaching little Thomas how to throw a rope while Sarah and Mary practiced their riding, circling the corral with easy competence. "Tell me about your dreams," Eleanor said suddenly. "Your dreams for the future. What do you see when you look ahead?" Garrett considered the question carefully. "I see our children grown and happy, building their own lives. I see this ranch continuing to prosper, passed down through generations. I see grandchildren running through this yard, learning to love the land the way we do. I see growing old with you, sitting on this porch, watching sunsets for another 40 years if we are lucky." "That sounds perfect," Eleanor whispered. "Every bit of it." "What about your dreams?" Garrett asked. "They are the same as yours," she said. "They always have been. From the moment I fell in love with you, my dreams became our dreams. I want our children to be happy and secure. I want this ranch to thrive. I want to watch grandchildren discover the joy of gathering warm eggs from happy chickens. And I want to sit on this porch with you holding your hand until one of us has to let go." "That will not be for a very long time," Garrett said firmly, as though he could will it to be true through sheer determination. "No," Eleanor agreed, "not for a very long time. We have too much living left to do." The years continued their steady march forward. The children grew into young adults with dreams and ambitions of their own. James, at 20, was already managing much of the horse breeding operation and had his eye on a sweet young woman from town, the daughter of the banker. Sarah, at 17, declared that she wanted to go to college, an unusual ambition for a young woman in the territory, but Garrett and Eleanor supported her wholeheartedly. Mary, at 14, was content on the ranch, deepening her knowledge of animal husbandry and developing a reputation for raising the finest chickens in 3 counties. Little Thomas, just 6 years old in 1904, was still discovering who he would become. In 1905, James married his sweetheart Catherine in a beautiful ceremony at the ranch. Garrett walked his eldest down the aisle with tears in his eyes, remembering the day James was born and marveling at how fast time had moved. Eleanor cried through the entire ceremony, overwhelmed with joy at seeing her firstborn so happy. James and Catherine built a house on ranch land, starting their own family while remaining part of the larger operation. Within a year, they had made Garrett and Eleanor grandparents with the birth of a daughter they named Rose. Sarah went off to college in California in 1906, studying literature and writing letters home that were full of excitement and new ideas. She promised to return, and both Garrett and Eleanor believed her, knowing that the ranch was in her blood no matter how far she traveled. Mary continued to flourish, her chicken operation becoming a serious business that contributed meaningfully to the ranch's income. She developed new breeding programs, improved egg production, and sold breeding stock to farms across the territory. The elaborate coop that Garrett had built for Eleanor's original chickens had become the centerpiece of a much larger operation, but it was maintained lovingly, a testament to where it all began. In 1909, when Garrett was 54 and Eleanor was 50, they celebrated their silver anniversary. The entire ranch turned out for the party, along with what seemed like half the territory. There was food and music and dancing, and their children gave speeches that had both of them crying with happiness. 25 years, Eleanor marveled, as they danced together under the stars, the party continuing around them. A quarter of a century since you built me that chicken coop and stole my heart. I believe you had already stolen mine by that point, Garrett countered. The coop was just my clumsy way of showing you. It was not clumsy. It was perfect. You are perfect. I am many things, but perfect is not one of them. Perfect for me, Eleanor insisted. You have been perfect for me every single day of these 25 years. You have been my partner, my best friend, my love. You have given me a life beyond anything I could have imagined. You took a grieving woman with nothing but some chickens and turned her world into something magical. We did that together, Garrett said, every step of the way, together. As they danced, surrounded by family and friends, by the ranch they had built, and the legacy they were creating, Garrett thought about that day so long ago when Eleanor had climbed down from Pete Morrison's wagon with her chickens, and her determination and her refusal to compromise on what mattered. He thought about how offering to build a coop, a simple gesture that had felt right in the moment, had changed the entire trajectory of his life. He had built the coop bigger than his own bunkhouse, and in doing so, he had built a future bigger than any dream he had dared to dream. He had found love and purpose and a family that filled his days with meaning. He had kept the promises he made both to Eleanor and to himself. The chickens that had started it all were long gone, replaced by generations of descendants, but their legacy lived on in the thriving flock that Mary tended with such care. Eleanor's mother's chickens had led her daughter to happiness, had helped her keep a promise, and had been the unlikely catalyst for a love story that had become legend on the ranch. As the years continued to pass, Garrett and Eleanor settled into the comfortable rhythm of a marriage that had weathered storms and celebrated triumphs, that had been tested and proven strong. They grew older together, their hair graying, their faces weathering like the land they loved. But their love remained as steady and sure as it had been from the beginning. Sarah came home from college with a degree and a husband, a kind professor of history whom she had met in her studies. They settled on the ranch as well, and Sarah began writing, documenting the history of the territory and the ranch itself, making sure the stories were preserved for future generations. Little Thomas grew into a young man with his father's steady nature and his mother's kind heart. He proved to have a gift for business, and by the time he was in his 20s, he was handling the financial side of the ranch operation with skill that impressed even Miguel, who had watched him grow up. More grandchildren arrived, filling the ranch with noise and laughter and the chaotic joy of childhood. Garrett and Eleanor reveled in their roles as grandparents, spoiling the children shamelessly and passing on the stories and values that had shaped their own lives. In 1920, when Garrett was 65 and Eleanor was 61, they sat together on the porch of the house he had built for her 34 years earlier. The chicken coop, now a historic landmark of sorts on the ranch, still stood proud and well-maintained, still housing chickens that were direct descendants of Eleanor's mother's flock. "Do you have any regrets?" Eleanor asked, taking his hand in hers, their fingers interlacing with the ease of 4 decades of practice. Garrett thought about the question seriously, as he always did when Eleanor asked him something important. "No," he said finally, "not a single one. My life has been everything I could have wanted and more. You have been everything I could have wanted and more." "Not even about building that absurdly large chicken coop?" Eleanor teased. "You could have built something practical and saved yourself a lot of work." "Especially not that," Garrett said firmly. That chicken coop was the best thing I ever built because it led me to you. It was my way of saying I saw you, I valued what mattered to you, and I wanted to be part of your life. If I had built something practical and sensible, maybe you would have thanked me politely, and that would have been the end of it. But I built something excessive and ridiculous, something that said I was already falling in love with you, even if I did not have the words yet. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears, as they still did so easily after all these years. You have always known exactly what to say to make my heart full. I have had a lot of practice, sir, Garrett said, pulling her closer. 38 years of marriage, to be exact, and I plan on having a lot more years to keep practicing. They did have more years, blessed years, full of the richness that comes from a life well lived and love well tended. They watched their grandchildren grow and begin to have children of their own, making them great grandparents. They watched the ranch continue to prosper under James's primary management, with contributions from all their children. They watched the world change around them, the territory becoming a state, the old ways giving way to new. But through it all, the ranch remained a constant, a legacy built on hard work and love and promises kept. The chicken coop, lovingly maintained by Mary and later by her own children, became something of a family shrine. Every new generation learned the story of how it had brought Garrett and Eleanor together, how it had been a symbol of love before either of them had spoken the words. Photographs of it were displayed in the ranch house, and the story was told and retold until it became part of the family mythology. In 1932, as Garrett approached his 77th birthday and Eleanor her 73rd, they sat together on their porch on a warm spring evening, much as they had done thousands of times before. The ranch was celebrating May Day, and there was music and laughter drifting up from the main yard where the younger generations were dancing. "Do you hear that?" Eleanor asked, her hand in Garrett's, her head on his shoulder. "The music?" Garrett asked, though his hearing was not what it once was. "The happiness," Eleanor clarified. "All that joy and life. We built that, Garrett, not just the ranch, not just the buildings and the business, but that happiness. We created a place where people can build lives and raise families and feel secure. That is our legacy." "Our legacy is love," Garrett said. "Everything else flowed from that." "You taught me how to love, Eleanor. You taught me that it was possible to build something good and lasting, that my past did not have to define my future. You gave me a reason to be better, to do better. And in return, I tried every single day to give you the life you deserved, the happiness you had earned." "You succeeded," Eleanor whispered. "Beyond my wildest dreams, you succeeded. I came here with nothing but chickens and hope, and you gave me everything. You gave me yourself, and that was always more than enough." They sat together as the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink and purple, the colors of Arizona sunsets that they had watched together for nearly 50 years. The chicken coop was visible from where they sat, still standing strong, still housing chickens, still a testament to promises kept and love found in unexpected places. Garrett tightened his arm around Eleanor, feeling the fragility of her bones, knowing that they were both nearing the end of their journey, but grateful for every moment they had been given. "I love you," he said, words he had spoken countless times, but which never lost their power or meaning. "I have loved you since the day you arrived with those chickens, and I will love you until my last breath and beyond." "And I love you," Eleanor replied, her voice soft but certain. "My cowboy who built a palace for chickens and a kingdom for my heart. Thank you for this beautiful life, Garrett. Thank you for everything." They sat together as darkness fell and the stars emerged, surrounded by the life they had built, the family they had raised, the love they had nurtured for nearly half a century. The ranch stretched out around them, prosperous and thriving, full of people who carried their legacy forward into the future. And in the chicken coop that had started it all, the descendants of Eleanor's mother's chickens settled in for the night, clucking softly, unaware that they were part of a love story that had become legend, that they represented promises kept and dreams realized, and a love that had transformed two lonely people into something greater than they could have ever been alone. The years ahead would bring more changes, more joys and sorrows, more grandchildren and great-grandchildren, more sunsets watched from the porch of the house Garrett built. Garrett and Eleanor would continue their journey together until, in 1936, Garrett passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 81, with Eleanor holding his hand, just as she had held it for so many years. Eleanor followed him less than a year later, unable to imagine a life without her partner, her love, her best friend. She passed away on a spring morning in 1937, and her last words were about the chickens and the cowboy who had built them a palace and her a future. They were buried together on the ranch, not far from where Thomas rested, with a simple headstone that read, "Garrett and Eleanor Hayes. They built a life from love and chickens and left a legacy of joy." The ranch continued, passed down through their children and grandchildren, each generation adding their own contributions while honoring the foundation that Garrett and Eleanor had built. The chicken coop, now more than 50 years old but maintained with devoted care, was never torn down. It stood as a monument to where it all began, to a woman who refused to compromise on what mattered, and a man who recognized that and loved her for it. And every year, on the anniversary of Garrett and Eleanor's wedding, the family would gather at the chicken coop, would tell the story to the newest generation, would remember the love that had started with chickens and had grown into something that changed the lives of everyone it touched. The coop that had been bigger than a bunkhouse had become the foundation of a legacy that would last for generations, a reminder that love often begins in unexpected places, that small gestures can change lives, and that promises kept are the building blocks of a life well lived. In the end, it had never really been about the chickens at all, though they had played their part. It had been about seeing someone truly, valuing what they valued, and being willing to build something beautiful together. It had been about love found, love nurtured, and love that lasted until death and beyond. And on the ranch that Garrett and Eleanor built, in the shadow of the mountains they both loved, their story continued to be told, a testament to the power of love, the importance of promises, and the magic that can happen when a cowboy builds a chicken coop bigger than his own bunkhouse for a woman who brought her own chickens to the ranch.